There are companies that build, and then there are companies that become myths. Enron was both, and neither. It began with an idea and ended with ashes. In the 1980s, America was obsessed with energy. Oil, gas, power, the lifeblood of a new industrial age. And deep in Houston, Texas, a quiet merger took place between two gas pipeline companies, Houston Natural Gas and Internorth. From that union, Enron was born. At first, it was simple, pipes and power. But Kenneth Lay, a soft-spoken economist from Missouri, had bigger dreams. He wanted Enron to be more than just another energy company. He wanted it to be the Amazon of energy before Amazon even existed. Lay had the charisma of a preacher and the ambition of a gambler. He saw deregulation, that government loosening its grip on energy markets, as an open door, and he planned to walk through it with both arms full. But deregulation is a dangerous thing. It creates opportunity and chaos. Enron began trading energy like stocks, buying and selling future contracts for gas and electricity. No more pipelines. No more limits. It was the dawn of a new idea, energy as information. And for a while, it worked. The numbers soared. The media called Enron America's most innovative company. Fortune magazine repeated it 6 years in a row. Shareholders worshipped Lay. Analysts praised Enron as the future of capitalism. But beneath the shine, smoke was already curling through the cracks. Enron wasn't making money from energy anymore. It was making money from the illusion of movement. Every trade, every deal, every projection was a hall of mirrors. Numbers feeding on numbers, projections stacked on hopes. And deep within this empire of glass and spreadsheets, a man named Jeffrey Skilling was about to strike the match that would light the fire. Jeff Skilling didn't just believe in Enron. He believed in a new religion, the market. He joined the company in the early 90s, a Harvard Business School prodigy with eyes like cold fire. To him, numbers weren't just tools. They were destiny. When Lay met Skilling, he saw more than an executive. He saw a prophet, someone who could turn Enron's chaotic trading into pure profit, or at least the appearance of it. Skilling's philosophy was simple, dangerously simple. He called it mark-to-market accounting. In plain English, it meant Enron could record future profits today, even if the cash hadn't arrived, even if it never would. Imagine selling a house and immediately claiming the next 10 years of rent as income. Sounds brilliant on paper, until the tenants move out. Skilling's system made Enron look unstoppable. Every new deal, no matter how risky, became instant profit. Analysts clapped. Investors cheered. Inside Enron's glass skyscraper in downtown Houston, the atmosphere was electric. Young analysts walked the halls like gods. Bonuses worth millions, egos even bigger. They called themselves the smartest guys in the room. And in that arrogance lay their doom. They said we were changing the world. But some started wondering if the world we were changing even existed. But Skilling didn't see cracks. He saw faith being tested. When executives raised concerns, he brushed them off with charm and confidence. We're not cheating, he'd say. We're innovating. And yet, deep down, the math didn't add up. Projects that looked like gold mines on paper bled money in reality. But Enron's magic accounting turned every loss into a future win. It was the perfect illusion, and the world believed it. By 1998, Enron was worth $60 billion. Its employees were celebrities, its leaders untouchable. Even the government admired their innovation. But as with all great illusions, the audience was never meant to see behind the curtain. And behind Enron's glowing screens and smiling faces, one small department was growing restless. They had seen things, numbers that didn't belong, deals that vanished into offshore entities with names like LJM and Chuko. One day, someone would talk. But not yet. Not while the music was still playing. Every empire built on smoke eventually meets fire. Inside Enron's skyscraper, a 50-story monument of glass and arrogance, the air felt different. You could taste ambition. You could smell money. The walls gleamed with modern art. The floors vibrated with caffeine and adrenaline. Everyone wanted to be noticed, to be the next star, the next millionaire. Enron wasn't just a company anymore. It was a belief system. Employees called it the Enron way, a gospel of endless growth, ruthless competition, and unchecked confidence. The culture was built on one rule. If you're not number one, you're gone. They had a system called rank and yank. Every year, employees were graded. The top performers got bonuses and promotions. The bottom 15% were fired. It didn't matter how hard you worked. It mattered how you looked on paper. And so the games began. Analysts inflated numbers. Traders exaggerated projections. Managers buried losses. Lying wasn't a crime here. It was a skill. One former employee described it as high school with guns. Another said it was Wall Street on steroids. They believed they were changing the world. But deep down, some knew they were just feeding a monster. By 2000, Enron had expanded far beyond energy. They were into broadband, weather futures, even water trading. If it could be priced, Enron wanted to own it. Jeff Skilling's vision was almost poetic. The world's first gas bank, he called it. And for a while, it seemed prophetic. But prophets rarely noticed the cracks in their own temples. Behind the scenes, Enron's accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, was beginning to worry. Their job was to audit Enron's financials, but what they found didn't make sense. Hundreds of off-book partnerships were quietly swallowing billions of dollars in debt. Entities with strange names. LJM1, LJM2, Chuko, Jedi. They weren't businesses, they were mirrors. Designed to hide losses, to make the company's books look pristine. We were told not to ask questions. That's when I knew something wasn't right. The deeper they looked, the darker it got. Executives were secretly investing in these entities themselves, profiting off deals that destroyed their own company's value. It wasn't innovation anymore. It was self-cannibalism. Still, the illusion had to continue. Stock prices were soaring. Wall Street adored them. The media crowned Enron the corporate model of the future. And every time a journalist asked tough questions, Enron's PR machine drowned them in charm and jargon. But one headline, one small whisper, would soon turn into thunder. Somewhere deep inside Enron, someone had begun taking notes. Someone who wasn't laughing anymore. The empire was still standing tall, but the smoke was getting thicker. There's an art to deception, a rhythm, a pattern, a story you tell yourself until you start believing it. At Enron, that story was written in numbers. Jeff Skilling called it financial engineering. His CFO, Andrew Fastow, called it structured finance. The accountants called it creative, but history would call it fraud. Fastow was brilliant, dangerously so. He built complex shell companies that could hide billions in losses from Enron's balance sheet. To the public, it looked like profit. To the insiders, it was barely controlled chaos. He once said, "The accounting rules don't say we can't. They just don't say we should." Those partnerships, LJM, Chuko, Jedi, they were Fastow's masterpieces, each designed to bury debt and inflate profit. For every million Enron lost, Fastow found a way to make it look like they gained too. Investors saw growth. The board saw innovation. And Fastow pocketed millions in management fees. But not everyone was convinced. An internal auditor noticed irregularities in one of the transactions. A deal so convoluted it looked like a magic trick. She brought it up during a meeting. "Sir, if this partnership collapses, Enron's entire balance sheet could. It won't collapse. That's not your concern." Fastow interrupted rudely. Fear began spreading quietly among mid-level staff. People started deleting emails, shredding memos. No one wanted to be the one holding the bag if the illusion broke. But the numbers, the sacred numbers, were no longer listening. Every new project needed to be bigger, flashier, more impossible than the last. Enron Online, the company's trading platform, was hailed as revolutionary. Skilling called it the future of commerce. But behind the code, the system was just shifting the same money in circles, a digital mirage. The profits weren't real. The empire wasn't stable. And the truth was catching up. By mid-2001, the illusion began to crack. Analysts started questioning Enron's financial statements. Journalists at the Wall Street Journal began sniffing around. One wrote, "Enron's financial statements are too complex for ordinary investors to understand." That was putting it lightly. Inside the company, anxiety turned into panic. Some executives sold their stock quietly, sensing the storm. Others stayed, too proud or too blind to believe it could all fall apart. When you build an empire out of smoke, you can't stop the wind. And soon, the wind would come, in the form of one woman who refused to look away. Her name was Sharon Watkins. Every empire has its gods. For Enron, they were Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling. Lay, the charming preacher's son who believed capitalism could be kind. Skilling, the cold strategist who believed the market was God. Together, they built an illusion so perfect, even they began to believe it. Lay was the face, the smile, the gentle hand that soothed investors, regulators, and journalists. Skilling was the brain, the fire, the storm that kept Enron's machinery running, even when it began to choke. They played their parts flawlessly. Lay preached innovation and ethics. Skilling preached survival of the fittest. Together, they built a culture where winning wasn't everything. It was the only thing. But power has a way of distorting perspective. By 2001, Skilling's temper was legendary. He'd snap at subordinates, mock analysts, and walk out of meetings mid-sentence. When one reporter questioned Enron's strange accounting, Skilling exploded furiously. You are an a-hole. It was the first public crack in Enron's spotless mask, a small glimpse into the pressure boiling beneath. Inside the company, morale was crumbling. Traders were being pushed to impossible targets, some working 18-hour days. Whispers filled the elevators. The numbers don't make sense. But speaking up meant being fired. In board meetings, Kenneth Lay remained oblivious, or pretended to be. He was too busy maintaining Enron's image, too invested in its myth. He told investors everything was fine. He told employees to buy more Enron stock. This is just a temporary dip. Enron's fundamentals are strong. But they weren't. Behind closed doors, Fasto's partnerships were collapsing under their own lies. The shell companies were eating through Enron's cash reserves. Millions gone. Skilling could feel the walls closing in. When genius turns desperate, the fall becomes inevitable. In August 2001, Skilling suddenly resigned, citing personal reasons. Wall Street gasped. The press speculated. But inside Enron, everyone knew. The captain was jumping ship. A storm was coming. And Kenneth Lay, the man who had built Enron's empire of smoke, was left alone to face the fire. But every storm begins with a whisper. And this one began with a woman. Her name was Sharon Watkins, a quiet accountant. Sharp, honest, the kind of employee who believed integrity still mattered. She wasn't a rebel. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She just wanted the truth to make sense. She began noticing things, strange transactions, off-balance entries, missing explanations, deals between Enron and shell companies run by their own CFO. It didn't make sense. Unless, of course, it was never meant to. Watkins started digging. Every number she checked led to another dead end. Every question raised got brushed aside. And then, one night, long after everyone had left, she opened a file she wasn't supposed to see. This can't be right, she said in a trembling voice. Inside, she found the blueprint of Enron's deception, the partnerships, the fake profits, the buried losses. She realized something terrifying. If the truth came out, Enron could collapse overnight. For days, she debated whether to speak up. She knew what would happen. Enron was not kind to dissenters. People who questioned the company's magic disappeared, quietly, politely, professionally. But her conscience wouldn't let her stay silent. On August 15, 2001, Sharon Watkins wrote a memo addressed to Kenneth Lay. It was 8 pages long, carefully worded, meticulous, terrified. In it, she warned Lay that Enron could implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She delivered it quietly. No press, no fanfare, just truth on paper. But what came next broke her faith entirely. Lay thanked her, smiled, promised to look into it, and then he buried it. Sometimes, the truth doesn't save you. It just burns slower. Behind the scenes, Enron's executives scrambled to contain the damage. They called lawyers, auditors, consultants, anyone who could spin the story. Arthur Andersen, the auditing firm, began shredding documents by the truckload. Literally, tons of paper, gone in days. But the truth has a strange way of surviving. One of the memos escaped. One email got missed. One journalist caught a whiff of the smoke. And once the press smelled the fire, the inferno couldn't be stopped. December 2, 2001. Enron Corporation, once the 7th largest company in America, had filed for bankruptcy. The shock was global. 30,000 employees lost their jobs and pensions. Millions of investors lost their savings. Banks and auditing firms scrambled to distance themselves. And in the middle of it all, the architects of the empire stood exposed. Jeff Skilling, the golden boy of capitalism, told Congress he didn't know what went wrong. Kenneth Lay insisted he'd been betrayed by others. Andrew Fastow, the numbers wizard, was indicted for fraud. But the real betrayal? It wasn't just numbers or balance sheets. It was faith, the belief that success meant moral superiority. Behind the scenes, investigators uncovered the full picture, a labyrinth of deceit, accounting manipulation, and corporate arrogance so vast it became a case study in corruption. Arthur Andersen, Enron's auditor, one of the big 5 accounting firms, was caught shredding documents, erasing evidence. They'd been complicit, protecting their billion-dollar client instead of the truth. Andersen would be indicted too. The Enron collapse sent shockwaves through the financial world. Laws changed. CEOs were suddenly expected to sign off on financial statements personally. Corporate America trembled. But it wasn't just an economic tragedy. It was human. Pensioners who'd invested their entire retirement funds in Enron stock found themselves penniless. One former employee said through tears, "They told us to buy more shares, even as they were selling theirs." It wasn't just greed, it was betrayal, wrapped in a smile. The trials were long and ugly. Skilling was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Fastow cut a deal. Lay died before sentencing. A heart attack that some called poetic justice. But even then, the story didn't end. Because Enron wasn't just a company, it was a symbol of how ambition without ethics becomes a weapon, of how innovation can be twisted into deception. In the end, Enron wasn't destroyed by a market crash or by bad luck. It was destroyed by greed and the illusion of invincibility. The empire of smoke had burned to ash, but its lessons linger. Every time a startup exaggerates its profits, every time a CEO hides losses behind innovation, every time greed dresses up as genius, Enron's ghost hovers nearby, whispering, "Remember me." Because, at its heart, this wasn't just a story about numbers. It was about people, their pride, their lies, and their belief that they were untouchable. And when that delusion met reality, it got burnt. This was Enron, the empire of smoke. A story of greed, evil genius, and ruin, where the only thing more dangerous than failure was success itself.